Welcome everyone, I'm William Henry. This is the first in a series of presentations I call the non-human intelligence question, or NHIQ. And my intention is to wade into the conversation about all of these incredible topics that are converging at one time amongst us. We're talking, of course, about disclosure of non-human intelligences, angels, aliens, interdimensionals. At the same time, we've got a confluence with another kind of alien intelligence, artificial intelligence. Is it human? Did it come from somewhere else? What's it all about? And what does all this mean to me or for me? I'm a historian and a mythologist, and I've always been of the belief that knowing a timeline, knowing where we enter a story is critical. It's sort of like we're watching a movie unfolding, and as everything starts to come down at once around NHIQ, we have to ask the question, is this the beginning of the journey, or are we somewhere late in the movie? Are we, for example, the hero who has chased the villain into the inmost cave and we got him cornered right now? Or has the villain got us cornered? And now we're trying to figure out how do we get out of this corner and how do we win, right? This is the value in having a historical context, a timeline, a chronology that helps us to know how we got to where we're at, so that then we can ultimately better navigate where we're going from here. And that's my intention here, is to talk about the robe of light, artificial intelligence, and transhumanism in the context of a timeline. I've mentioned this topic so many times in the past, but I've felt called to just put it into a very concise 45-minute to 1 hour presentation to where anyone stepping into this timeline will be able to benefit from my own journey, because my journey is your journey, and also get a better sense of the bigger picture, the framing, if you will, intelligence question. So I'm going to dive into my presentation here, and let's share some ideas, and let's be open-minded about what I'm going to be talking about, and let's start to think about how we can be transformed by this historical moment that we are sharing at this moment. So, the robe of the soul, AI, and transhumanism. What if the most powerful technology on Earth is not artificial? It's not a temple, it's not a tomb, it's not a pyramid, it's not even artificial intelligence. What if the most powerful technology on Earth is you? You, but not your body, not your genes, not your brain, not your heart, but you. What the ancients described as your immortal self, your soul, your divine spark. They claimed that the divine spark, the soul, manifests this physical flesh and blood body as a vehicle for navigating this particular layer of creation. It's created for this layer. It's ideal for navigating this realm. And that's a very good possibility. But what the ancients also said about this divine spark is that it wears a robe, or a cloak, a garment of the soul, the robe of light, the robe of glory, the robe of the soul. These are all terms that have been used for thousands of years to describe what the ancients said is actually the most powerful technology on Earth, the robe of your soul. It can illuminate intelligence, it can make you invisible, give you super strength, gives you connectedness to all minds on Earth and perhaps elsewhere in the cosmos. It is you. And I want to talk about you in light of, or in the context of, AI and transhumanism. And in order to do that, I want to establish a personal timeline of investigating or researching this robe of the soul, this garment of light, and also point out a ticking clock that was activated a few decades ago that is going to be ringing, or is presently beginning to ring. And this represents the morning for all humanity once this alarm bell goes off. So let's go back to 2002, late 2002. I'm finishing my book called Cloak of the Illuminati. It's about the robe or garment of light. And I called it the cloak of the Illuminati because Illuminati was a term that the earliest Christians used to describe themselves. And I was looking at this question of this robe through primarily a mystical Christian lens. And I was surprised to learn that the Christians called themselves Illuminati. I thought that was some term for some nefarious conspiracy theory type of dark, maybe even evil organization. It is. They hijacked the term around 1776. The word illumined one was intact as a mystical Christian term all the way up through the 14th century when Mary Magdalene was described as the Illuminati or the illumined one. And so I'm researching this cloak of the illumined ones, and I'm realizing that the reason they called themselves the illumined ones, by the way, is because they used a lighted taper or candle as a symbol for their mystical order, for their teaching. And the candle, what it actually represented was your spinal cord system. And the wick of the candle was your pineal gland, your neuro-secretary system, this wondrous manufacturing plant of sacred oils and secretions and excretions that do everything from put us to sleep, to heal the physical body, to put us in ecstatic states of joy, all the way up to dimethyltryptamine that opens portals or gateways in our consciousness. It's all produced endogenously by our pineal gland. And the trick is to light that candle. How do we ignite that wick? And that's in part what I want to talk about with you today, because ultimately activating this illuminated part of ourself is the answer for how we navigate what is to come. It's how we're going to give ourselves vision to be able to perceive who we are, what we're doing here, and where we go from here. So I'm mapping this garment, or this light body garment, into mystic Christianity, but I had realized it didn't start there. It actually began 2,500 years before, at least, in ancient Sumeria, the very first, we're told, advanced civilization, founded by the Anunnaki, beings that some believe come from another world. They're non-human intelligences. They are extraterrestrials. They're associated with a planet in our solar system, or they travel through gateways. And I started collecting the images of the Sumerian gods as they would enter and exit the earth plane through these gateways. We're looking here at, for example, Shamash, the sun god. He's stepping between two mountains, a horizon, in between two mystic pillars or gateways, and he's got these rays of light that are coming off of his body, and he's got a horned helmet that we're told is not actually horns. Those also are rays of light. And this is our first look at the Anunnaki and realizing that somehow they're radiant or they're luminous. And the somehow that makes them radiant or luminous is due to a garment they possess. They brought it with them. It's called the Melammu. Melammu. It refers to radiance and the strength of the possessor. It's described as if it's an actual tangible or physical garment that the Anunnaki possessed that made them luminous and radiant, perhaps gave them super strength as well. It's important for us to recognize this because the Anunnaki, or the depictions of the Anunnaki as luminous and radiant, are actually the foundation for all other Middle Eastern, especially biblical accounts of luminosity and radiance, of which we'll talk about several momentarily. But the idea here is that the Anunnaki possessed a garment. It's described as being composed of wavy lines, wavy indicating perhaps frequency or vibration. It's luminous, and the term, again, Melammu, means divine radiance. And this is a distinguishing force. It separated the Anunnaki from humans. But here's the thing. A human could acquire the Melammu, this garment of light, from the Anunnaki and become not Anunnaki, but they could become what they describe in the Old Testament text as a mighty one, a mighty man, an enhanced human, a human who has taken on superhuman powers vis-a-vis the acquisition of a cloak or a garment, the Melammu. And the idea here is that humans were designed in order to have this experience. Perhaps it was possible for us to acquire this Melammu, this garment of light, and then step through the portals or gateways with the Anunnaki. But what is clear here is that this establishes something extremely important in the human timeline, and that is, one, humans are interacting with non-human intelligences here, the Anunnaki. They're bequeathing them this advanced knowledge and indeed perhaps even this divine power, and that humans, by acquiring this, are changed. They are transformed. They are transfigured. They actually become pure, is the term, and bright. That's the meaning of Me is divine. Elu means both pure and bright. So the idea is that a human can upgrade themselves through the acquisition process of claiming this robe or garment of light and becoming a luminous and radiant one like the Anunnaki. So this is establishing for me a bedrock of this teaching. We're looking here at a beautiful statue of the woman with the living waters, the woman with the vase of living waters. This is considered to be Inanna, or Ishtar. She's an Anunnaki priestess. She is the daughter of one of the chief Anunnaki scientists. Enki is his name. And I use the word scientist in quotes because it is believed that the Anunnaki are responsible for altering human DNA and shifting us into a different timeline. And Inanna is portrayed here in this statue that is 4,500 years old, modeling for us 7 of what are called Me, or divine powers. In the oldest human story, which is the descent of Inanna into the underworld, she descends into the underworld, and along the way she acquires 7 divine powers or objects. The Shigura helmet, which poetically translated by Zecharia Sitchin means that which makes go far into the universe. What kind of a helmet can you put on that makes you go far into the universe? It's horned, or it's rays. It's illuminated, is what we're seeing. She's got her rainbow necklaces on. She has ointment on her eyes that awaken her spiritual vision. She holds the mystic vase in her hand of flowing living waters, and she wears what's called the pala garment, or miracle garment. As she descends, she acquires these, and in her ascension, she releases them because she no longer needs them. So in some way, these Me powers, including the Melammu, facilitate not only human transformation, but also our ascension into other layers of reality or creation. Now, Inanna is important to our story because in this world's second oldest story, the Epic of Gilgamesh, she tells the Sumerian king, Gilgamesh, that he's 2/3 divine and 1/3 human. And if he wants to make it through the gate of the gods, which he's portrayed standing in this incredible cylinder seal, then Inanna says, Gilgamesh, you're going to have to clean up your act, because if you try to go through that gate at 2/3 divine, 1/3 human, it's going to be like walking into a blender. You're going to get your feathers ruffled. So she's imparting to Gilgamesh a technique or a necessity, even a technology of transformation. She is saying, Gilgamesh, you're 2/3 divine. Divinity, of course, is symbolized by a circle, and a circle is 360 degrees. So she's telling Gilgamesh that he's 240 out of 360. And I know you're probably thinking you were told there would be no math in this conversation, but that finishes the math. Gilgamesh is 240 out of 360. He's 2/3 divine, 1/3 human. And to me, that suggested something quite powerful, that perhaps, what if all of humanity starts at that baseline? What if we're all at some point 240 out of 360, and our quest is to move the needle, to attain complete divinity, wholeness, holiness, purity, perfection? These are the terms that the ancients would use for the next level human that we're all aspiring to be. And Gilgamesh is our first hero on this quest. He's the first guy that says, hey, I'm going to hit the books. I'm going to hit the gym. I'm going to improve my diet. I'm going to do some visualization, some chanting, some meditation. I'm going to move that needle. I'm going to get up there more into the divine realm, and I'm going to make it through the gate of the gods. And again, this is what we see Gilgamesh standing in right now. We've got wavy lines on either side of him that symbolize either water or frequency or vibration. So this is either a water gate or it's a frequency gate that he's stepping through. He has scaled a ladder that he stands upon, indicating the scaling does that he's raised his vibration, he's moved the needle. But still we have two angels, two beings, janitors is what they're known as in the Sumerian text. It's the first use of that word. These janitors are holding open these ringing or ring posts. Now, this is very important because the message is, once again, if Gilgamesh walks through this gate and he's not fully pure, whole, and holy, it's going to be like walking into a blender. The janitors are there to pick up the feathers, right? But they're also there to hold open that gateway for us. And they're the greeters at that liminal space between Earth and the next realm. So from Gilgamesh, in my journey, I took the Sumerian stories and mapped it onto the next oldest civilization, Egypt. And here we find in this incredible Ben, Osiris, the Egyptian god of resurrection, standing in exactly the same portal or gateway that Gilgamesh was just standing in moments ago. Osiris now becomes the resurrection hero. And we are, of course, told in Egyptian mythology that Osiris is the god of resurrection. He was called Wenenefer, the one who continues to be perfect. And there's that word again, perfection. And in the Egyptian tradition, Wenenefer refers to Osiris's title, but it also refers to or alludes to his post-mortem power to recreate or regenerate a new light body in the afterlife and continue on his soul's journey. He's literally talking about Osiris as a teacher that would help us to create a body double into which our consciousness can be deposited and we can live forever, walking the stars. Think about that in the context of what we're doing with mind uploading now and creating avatars in a simulated reality. We'll come back to that in a later conversation. But here is Osiris establishing this fundamental idea that humans, once again, are transformable. We can upgrade ourselves. We can become as Osiris. We can follow him in his resurrection. And what happened in my story is that I came to realize, of course, that in Egypt you have wondrous technologies for human transformation. The pyramids themselves are ascension instruments. We're now on the cusp of fully, I believe, understanding the pyramids as an ascension technology, of the use of canals and waterways, of use of frequency of the earth, energy and vibration from the cosmos that get this whole Giza sphere ringing or singing, and an individual properly prepared and ready to go can be transfigured by the light of the pyramids and even teleported to other regions of space-time. That's what we're asked to believe is at the very heart of the ancient Egyptian pyramid texts, which profusely express the idea that humans can be transfigured into beings of light. They called those beings Ak. That we could enter into this luminous phase, somewhat like lightning, and traverse the galaxies. And once again, in the Egyptian tradition, it is Osiris who star-walked from the star system Orion to Earth, established this resurrection technology. Some believe had a hand in building the pyramids as mirror images of the three belt stars of Orion. And then Osiris returns to Orion and encourages us to follow him on that path. As you will perhaps recall in my work, I understand that journey across the stars is made by boat, by the Ark of the Millions of Years, by the ship of eternity that is commandeered by the perfect ones, by the perfecti, those who have upgraded their souls. And I have shown in many, many presentations before the correspondence between the Egyptian ship of eternity, the Ark of the Millions of Years, and the modern day concept of the wormhole, as if to say that the ancient Egyptians left us an advanced sacred science of human transformation that would enable ordinary individuals to upgrade their body from a physical flesh and blood body into a light body and star walk across the universe through a system of stargates and wormholes. It was, of course, Ptah, the Egyptian god of craftsmen and technology, who is responsible for the creation of that Ark of the Millions of Years, as well as the garment of Osiris. That Osiris garment, according to Gerald Massey, a 19th century British mystic poet and Egyptologist, he discovered that garment was called the crossed garment. It's spelled K-R-A-S-T, but it looks like Christ. And I always loved to joke that when I lived in Nashville for 40 years, my friends would go to the Church of Christ, and little did they know they were using an ancient Egyptian term for the light body garment of Osiris and Ptah. Christ, of course, means the anointed, and anointed refers to an anointing or baptism with oil that is capable of upgrading the human body. And I believe that the oil of Christ was also known to the ancient Egyptians as well. And it points to the introduction of technologies, be they organic or artificial, into the human body that can act as a catalyst for its transformation. In this scene here, we see Nefertari, the wife of Ramses the Great, the queen of resurrection. She is holding the Egyptian hieroglyph for new clothes out to Ptah, and she is saying, "Thank you, Ptah, for helping me to weave my crossed garment, helping me to weave my afterlife garment of light, so now that I too can become a star walker." It's a profound revelation that this is exactly what all the ancient Egyptian traditions and technologies were about, was the weaving or creation of this robe of the soul, this robe or garment of light. And it's fascinating to me to point out Ptah's business card. We see that he is called the architect of heaven and earth, the master craftsman in working metals, sculptor, designer. He's the fashioner of the bodies of men. That means he didn't create the human body, but he did something to alter it. He fashioned the body. And when we look at Ptah's hieroglyph, we see, at least I see, very clearly a double helix or a twisted rope in his hieroglyph. That's a William Henryism, because Egyptologists say there's no way the ancient Egyptians knew anything about the double helix or genetics, but yet here's the business card of the god they say fashioned the human body with what clearly looks like a double helix in it. It's also got a square, which is symbolic of earth and the elements of which our body is composed, earth, air, fire, and water, and a half circle. And this establishes for me the reason why Ptah would have altered the human body, effectively in installing the idea of transhumanism from the very beginning of human mythology. Why did we become more than we were before, transhumans, under the guidance of Ptah? So that we could unite earth, the square, with heaven, the circle. And apparently that's not an easy thing to do, because otherwise, why would this be so unique to humanity? Is it possible that humans are the unique species in all of the universe that can unite heaven and earth? Or does it indicate that our alteration and our transformation is aiming towards something quite profound? The recognition that humanity is part of a living family of intelligences spread throughout the cosmos. And as we activate these abilities within us, we become more and more aware of our greater family in the stars. Now, just like the Sumerian tradition, the cross is transferable. Just like the Melammu is transferable, the crossed garment is transferable in the Egyptian tradition. When we go to Egypt together, I will take you into the Grand Egyptian Museum, and we will make a personal study of one of the most remarkable artifacts left by the ancient Egyptians, the outer shrine of King Tutankhamun's tomb, guarded and protected by Isis and Nephthys. We see a clear illustration of Tutankhamun's transformation, transfiguration, or transhumanization on this shrine. We see Tutankhamun in the center. He's wearing his crossed garment. We see a star with 3 beams of light being projected into the third eye, or the forehead of King Tutankhamun. He's in a pupal phase here, pupal, P-U-P-A-L. He's like a chrysalis at this moment, getting ready to morph into a butterfly. He's also a pupil, P-U-P-I-L, a student. He's an initiate. He's being activated, ignited by this light. Remember the candle idea? Here's how it's ignited. The candle is the spinal cord, the wick, the pineal gland. The oil of the candle is the excretions from the neuro-secretary system. This candle is lit by a higher dimensional light coming from a sacred center, perhaps. Perhaps it's coming through Sirius or Orion. Either way, it's a light beyond light that activates or ignites the neuro-secretary system and produces the unfolding of the chrysalis into the butterfly, the human into the image of God. Homo sapien becomes Homo luminous. Not only that, but when we look at the hieroglyphs that accompany King Tutankhamun, we see the bird, symbolic of the soul, the Ba, the soul. We see the determinative for walking, and we read this cartoon that Tutankhamun is soul walking. Yes, but we also know that to the ancient Egyptians, souls were stars, and stars are souls. Therefore, this is Tutankhamun as a star walker. He is star walking in my terminology, and he has had his neuro-secretary system activated in order to produce that experience. Leaving Egypt behind, let's go into the Jewish Christian mystical tradition. Let's talk about the story of Adam and Eve. We all know the story. Adam and Eve lived in a higher frequency realm. We call it Eden, paradise. Eve is tempted by a serpent to eat the fruit of the tree of life that would ultimately grant immortality. As a consequence of this, humanity as a collective are evicted from Eden. The Old Testament God Yahweh, the Jewish God, at that moment does two things. One, he creates a gate at the east of Eden, and he stations cherubim angels on either side of that gate. He puts a flashing, flaming sword in the middle of that gate and forbids us to return. Now, that arrangement, the two pillars, is exactly what we've just seen in the Egyptian and the Sumerian depictions as well, but they didn't talk about a flashing, flaming sword in the middle of the gateway. And what is that flashing, flaming sword? Flashing, flaming, that sounds like plasma. Are we talking about some kind of a plasma device that is preventing humanity from re-entering Eden? The second thing that Yahweh did, the Old Testament God, is he made for humanity coats of skin. Many believe or propose that those coats of skin are some sort of an animal skin, like a deer skin or a buck skin, goat skin, calf skin. But in the esoteric or mystical version of this story, those coats of skin are our human bodies. And what that means is we do not belong in these bodies. These bodies are adapted for life in this layer. According to Jewish mysticism, as the Zohar says, when Adam dwelt in the Garden of Eden, he was clothed in the celestial garment, which is the garment of heavenly light, light of that light which was used in the Garden of Eden. Well, hang on there. That sounds exactly like the crossed garment in Egypt and the Melammu in ancient Sumeria, given that the entire book of Genesis is almost a complete recycling of previous Sumerian and Egyptian traditions. It makes sense that they're talking about this, but they're not identifying in the Old Testament that Adam and Eve were once illumined beings. They were gifted with radiance and luminosity. And furthermore, what this means is that before humans lived on earth, when we were in Eden, we were in a different form. We had, as the word is described, perfect bodies of light. The inhabitants of the pre-flood world remembered a previous type of existence in another level of reality. That's where all of these stories of the robe of light come from. It originates in the pre-flood world, and then it's remembered after the end of the Younger Dryas, as we describe it today. So what if you also, like Adam and Eve, had a prior existence, or a part of you remains in a higher, finer realm, while another part of you, described as the divine spark, incarnates in this layer of creation and manifests one of these bodies as a vehicle for incarnation? That is not oversimplifying these ancient traditions, it's pretty much reducing it down to the common denominator of what they are saying. And it's important for us to have that bit of context, because all of the spiritual traditions that I've studied relative to this say that our hide, our body, is what conceals us from our true selves. Our hide is what we hide behind. Our hide it's a membrane, it's a boundary between worlds. My internal world ends at my skin. The skin is my barrier that separates me from you and you from me. It's a boundary. It's like a drum skin. It's like a veil. It's like a shroud. And according to these ancient esoteric traditions, it's meant for us to unhide. It's meant for us to awaken and reveal who we truly are as beings. And I'm sharing this with you because, in my view, this is the key to navigating what is occurring with transhumanism, artificial intelligence, and even with non-human intelligence. Louis Ginsburg, in his Legends of the Jews, says that Adam's garment is identical to the celestial robes of the righteous in the Jewish and the Christian tradition. So he's telling us that this shining garment, or this garment of light, was of extraordinary brilliance and splendor, and it is who we truly are as beings. And once again, it's possessed of supernatural qualities. And once we acquire it, once we identify with it, once we stop hiding and live with this light body on the outside rather than the inside, we have the most powerful technology on Earth. Not even AI or transhumanism can touch it. And once again, more motivation for following this path. So let's keep going. Let's go into the 8th century BC. Let's talk about the prophet Elijah. Elijah, 8th century BC. He's known to have possessed a pala garment, a miracle garment, that he could use to heal the sick. He could raise the dead. He could part the waters of the River Jordan. And he ultimately ascended in a chariot of fire. A chariot of fire, a plasma chariot, because after all, fire is plasma, right? So Elijah is ascending into the heavens in a whirlwind, as it's described in the Book of Kings, riding upon this plasma chariot, this Merkabah, and as he's ascending, he turns to his priest Elisha and transmits to Elisha his pala garment. He transfers it to him. This is exactly like the Sumerian account of the Melammu. They're passing it along from one person to another as if it's a tangible thing, or once again, possibly a frequency, a teaching, a vibration that they're able to offer. And I just love these scenes of Elijah and his plasma chariot ascending. You see him in this one. He's ascending, and up at the top left, you see stars, you see bands of stars, you see a hand entering out of the stars. That means that he's transgressing the physical world and he's entering into the immaterial world. He's going back to the realm of pure or perfect light humans. And once again, Elisha is on the receiving end of this cloak or garment, this miracle garment, the pala garment that Elijah possessed. Now, here's what's fascinating. According to Jesus, Elijah reincarnated around 8 centuries later as the Essene mystic healer John the Baptist. John the Baptist is shown in Christian art wandering out into the wilderness and reacquiring his cloak or his garment. Once he has it, he's got his superpowers back, and now he invites his cousin, Jesus, from up in the Galilee, Yeshua, to meet him at the River Jordan that Elijah had just previously had split open with this miracle garment. At the River Jordan, the heavens open, we're told in the New Testament. John rips open a hole in the fabric of space-time and in pours a divine light referred to as the Holy Spirit. And just like in the depiction of Tutankhamun with the star and the 3 beams of light, the Holy Spirit also ejects triple beams of light. These are called the rays of enlightenment. And so what we have here at this moment is a moment of ignition. ignition. Christ understands the candle metaphor, and the pineal gland is the wick, and the holy oils, and this divine light, this frequency, is entering into his consciousness and igniting these super advanced capabilities. And what this is telling me is the method by which the Melammu, or the crossed garment, is actually ultimately activated. I say this because what we're looking at here is John pouring this divine light and living waters into the open crown chakra of his cousin Yeshua. And if we're paying close attention, this is reminding us 100% of Akhenaten and Nefertiti, who linked with the Atan, the light that illuminates the sun, the one light. And we see Nefertiti also wearing the crossed garment, the robe or garment of light, indicating a correspondence between their illumination by the Atan and the activation of this light. And if we're paying attention to the baptism scenes, what we notice is that, and the painter here, by the way, is the studio of Del Vecchio, but down in the left-hand side, we see two angels that are painted by Leonardo da Vinci. They are holding a cloak or a garment in their hands. This is the Melammu. This is the cross. This is the robe of the soul, the garment of light. And what is happening here is Christ is now receiving it, or Jesus has received it, and he now becomes the Christ after this moment. And we know this because immediately after the baptism, Jesus now takes 3 disciples, Peter, James, and John, up to the top of a high mountain and transfigures before them. His face shines like the sun, plasma. His clothes become bright as white light. He's demonstrating the capabilities of a human body that has now been enhanced or infused with this divine light, and now has activated the Melammu, the divine garment, the pure power, divine power garment, right? And there are many that believe that the transfiguration is actually the resurrection of Jesus. And I'm one of them, that he is in the transfiguration, he is metamorphosing, he's going beyond human, he's becoming a transhuman at this moment by definition. 1,300 years later, Dante had exactly the same experience, contact with a flash of light from the mystic rose. And he coins the word transhumanar, transhuman, to describe his transformation from mortal flesh and blood into a plasma-like state. And here's the very important point from the Gospel of Philip in this regard. If the transfiguration is the resurrection, as I believe it is, it tells us something very important. Philip says, the Lord rose from the dead. He became as he was, but now his body was perfect. Now his body was perfect. He possessed flesh, but this was true flesh. Our flesh isn't true. Ours is only an image of the true. That's the most important point, in my opinion, in all of the Gnostic Gospels. It's alluding to the fact that our mortal flesh and blood body can become a perfect light body. We can put on the robe of light, the robe of the soul, and our earthly flesh is not our true self. It's only an image of our true self, and we have forgotten who our true self actually is. This is why this is the key to navigating what we are transpiring right now with AI and transhumanism. We must recognize that our flesh is not our true self, that we are actually a divine being existing in a higher reality, and a part of ourself has entered into this realm. We'll keep probing that idea as we go. Before we proceed, though, I want to just acknowledge that the ancient world had a number of terms for this cloak or garment. We talked about the Melammu in Sumeria. We talked about the crossed in Egypt. The Gnostics referred to it as the robe of light, the robe of sanctity, the robe of glory, the shining garment, the garment of light, the beaming garment. That's my favorite term. It comes from the Manichaeans, 2nd century in Iran. They called it the beaming garment because when you acquired it, you became luminous. You were beaming, you're radiating light. But also, it suggests to me that it can be interpreted in light of modern day Star Trek terminology, where beaming refers to dissolving the body into information, energy, and then reformulating it at another location. So this is something the ancients taught, that our body is capable of dematerializing into its divine essence, projecting it to another region in space-time, and then phasing back into physicality if we would choose to do so. Now, the Greek word that's used to describe this robe or garment, the beaming garment, is exousia, and it means authority, jurisdiction, liberty, power, right to act, ability, privilege, capacity, and strength. These are all of the things that many believe our culture and our technology is robbing from us today. Not incrementally, like practically wholesale. People are starting to feel powerless in the face of AI and transhuman technology, powerless in the face of non-human intelligences walking amongst us. So what do? My answer is we get more acquainted with the robe of light. We reclaim our authority, our jurisdiction, our liberty, our power, our right to act, our ability, privilege, capacity, and strength. It's well within our ability to do all of these things. We just now need to do them. And following in the model of Jesus is one good way to do it. He encourages us to rise and do not be afraid. As the disciples are looking up at this man, human flesh and blood, radiating light, rise and do not be afraid. We all have the capacity to do this. So, I'm finishing my book, Cloak of the Illuminati. It's late 2002, early 2003. And there's this giant clunk on my desk. It's a report from the National Academy of Science and the United States Department of Commerce. What it said is that they took all of the big tech players that were in existence then to a meeting in Hawaii, and they told them that some of them are working in the area of bits or computer science. Some are working in the area of atoms or nanotechnology. Some are working in the area of neurons, figuring out how the brain works. Some are working in the area of genes. And they said they want to take all four of those seemingly independent technologies and blend them into one seamless technology aimed at the human body, specifically at the human skin. They went on to say that this would trigger wealth beyond imagination, solve all our earthly problems, including hunger, poverty, disunity among the human race. All of those problems would vanish as suddenly humans plug themselves into this vastly intelligent, artificially intelligent hive mind, as they described it, and that we would then ultimately have a new human race, a new human-machine interface. All this would be in place by 2030, and we would then enter into a new golden age. And I'm looking at this thinking, that's incredible. And what struck me was that these technologies, bits, atoms, neurons, and genes, those to me were just retooled versions, technological versions of earth, air, fire, and water, the four elements of which our bodies are composed. And I'm looking at this thinking, where's the fifth element? Where's the spirit? Where's the soul? There is no soul in any of this. And I started to think that what was happening here is that these big tech players were really mirroring the cloak or robe of light. They were trying to recreate it with technology. It was plain as day to me that when they're talking about putting an external layer of solar protected skin with tone and texture changeability and smart skin that's interwoven with nanotechnology, you can even change not just its texture but its color on demand, and you're wired 24/7 to this enhanced meta brain. That this is a mirroring of exactly what the ancients said we can do organically with the Melammu, and they promised that this would be walking in our streets around 2030. And I was alarmed. In fact, I started to get mad. I thought, wait a minute, you're not mirroring this enhanced spiritual capability, this incredible ability that the avatars wield. You're actually, I think you're mocking it. You're almost, I've read Silicon Valley types as being these like power mongers saying, oh, we're challenging God, you know, statements like, oh, the human body's too fragile, it's imperfect, God baked the cake. We're now going to put the icing on the cake. That was the attitude. And it actually kind of, it infuriated me. And from 2003 on, I go out into the wilderness of our community. I'm like, hey, y'all, you want to know what I just found out? I've been studying this robe or garment of light, and here comes Silicon Valley or maybe Beijing and Washington, D.C. working together saying, hey, we're going to put your children on the altar of transhuman technology to make trillions of dollars and introduce a new human race. And nobody asked us. I was actually quite pissed about it. And as I go out into the wilderness of our community, I'm making a warning, and people are like, William, what are you talking about? What do you mean there's a robe of light and that Silicon Valley is somehow trying to recreate this and they're going to turn us into machines? You're scaring us. Stop talking about that. We don't have any idea what you're talking about. And I get it. I mean, 20 years ago, this was something that there was just a few of us that were actually contemplating this idea, and especially linking it to, hey, what I'm perceiving here is a choice that we all have to make. We're either going to remain pure and organic humans, I proposed, and develop our humanness organically. In other words, we're hardwired to do all of these wondrous things, produce the robe or garment of light, and we need to do it from within, not from without, because if we choose the transhuman path, where are we going to be, right? I was not at all aligned with the idea of transhumanizing humanity. And again, I'm out in the wilderness speaking about this. The years roll on. It now comes up to 2006, and I learn about the Tibetan rainbow light body tradition. I was at a conference, and a lovely couple who worked for the Dalai Lama came up to me and said that my work in Egypt with the Ark of the Millions of Years, the ship of eternity, the boat, the wormhole business, they said answered for them questions about the Tibetan rainbow light body teachings that the Tibetans wouldn't answer because they didn't know the answer or couldn't answer because it was secret. And I'm dumbfounded by this, flattered that my work in Egypt answers something about the Tibetan tradition. And what they said is that according to the rainbow light body teaching, which they refer to as the great perfection, the human body was designed to have its frequency accelerated until it drops its hide. It dissolves its skin into 5-colored rainbow light, leaving behind only hair, toe, and fingernails, which have no nerves to be transmuted, and then they can project themselves to any of the other 13 star systems the Tibetans claim, where this teaching is taught, and then they can face back into physicality. My work in Egypt answered for them, how do they get there? Because they looked at the lotus that you see the lamas or the avatars manifesting through, and they realized that lotus is exactly the same as the lotuses on the Ark of the Millions of Years in Egypt, and that what effectively happens is that our body becomes a wormhole from the soul's perspective. The soul can manifest this boat, can travel the cosmos, and when it doesn't need that boat, it somehow conceals it or tucks it away. The Nordics have, to me, the best answer for it. They tell about this boat that all the gods of Asgard, the Nordic gods could ride on this boat. And when they didn't need the boat anymore, when they were at a shore, for example, they could fold the boat up and put it in someone's pocket. And then when they needed it again, they just pull it out, unfold it, and load up. I mean, that's mind-blowing to me. The human imagination, the sci-fi aspect of the human imagination has always been there. And I think about this boat and the robe now together, that, yeah, perhaps when this perfected human, Sahu, or Orion, Captain Orion as I call him, finally meets his destination, he just takes his boat, folds it up, puts it in his robe of the soul until he needs it again. What if that's the case here? So I'm coming back now to the rainbow light body and realizing this is the transfiguration in the Buddhist tradition. They're talking about us having this organic, natural, pure human ability to awaken the light body from within. And it's more powerful than any technology on Earth, artificial or not, right? And I made the clear comparison here. I went back to the transhuman images and saw this rainbow spectrum of the the bits, atoms, neurons, and genes, as I called them, the neuro-bio-info-cogno media, as it's also described. And I said, it's clear as a bell, isn't it? That we have a choice. We either remain pure and organic humans and activate our light bodies, or we do so through technology. And once again, I'm still in this place where I've got tens of thousands of words on my website of vile that I was spitting at these big tech giants, these big tech lords. I mean, who do they think they are doing this? Are they, is this some kind of alien technology? It was horrific, right? And it finally gets to be 2014. I wrote my book, The Singularity is Near. It's just a 90-page primer that anybody can read, and at that time get up to speed on where we were at with AI and transhumanism and what was coming. And I stated, I am 99.9999% sure we do not want anything to do with AI and transhuman technology. And in fact, what I had deduced or came to believe is that if we follow the transhuman path, what is really at stake is our ability to ascend. The ability to ascend. And in fact, I was on the air back then with George Nuri on Coast to Coast AM, and I'm explaining this, and he's like, well, where do you get this idea that that our ability to ascend is what's really on the line with transhumanism? And I pointed out that as in 2012, I wrote a book called The Secret of Sion, and I was deep into some of the Gnostic texts, the Apocryphon of John, for example. Jesus tells the disciples that had previously told them, I am from above, you are from below, you are from this world, I am not from this world. And Jesus is identifying himself as a conduit between these layers or between these realms. And he goes on to say that the next layer is inhabited. It's inhabited by angels gathered in joyful assembly, which sound like today's non-human intelligences. Non-human intelligences gathered in joyful assembly, and there are just humans made perfect who dwell at that layer. And I'm like, who are these people, these perfect ones, and how did they get there? And can I join them, right? I mean, I've read about all these perfect and pure humans, and now we're told that they also live at this next higher layer. So I realize that the description of these beings, just humans made perfect, is actually a formula. It's a formula for human transformation. It's a formula for humans to become transhumans, but in an organic way, right? But let's look at the definitions. The word just means righteous. They are righteous humans. Well, wait a minute. Just a moment ago, Louis Ginsburg had told us that the righteous ones wear the robe or garment of light like Adam wore. So that must mean these just humans made perfect guys, they're wearing the robe of light, the robe of the soul, the Melammu, the cross, right? They're just, meaning righteous humans clothed in the robe of light. Just also goes back to ancient Egypt as well, the concept of Ma'at, the Judgment Day scenario. The Egyptians would have their heart weighed against the feather of Ma'at, or cosmic truth, justice, or righteousness. If your heart balanced with the feather, you went on to the next layer. If your heart weighed more than the feather, there was a recycling program, and you got to go round and round and round on this layer, apparently, until you purified your heart, and now you could be a participant in the domain of Ma'at, in the greater universe. So just means righteous, but it also means an alignment or attunement with the divine cosmos. But just also means only, right? They're only humans made perfect. And, it's like we can imagine those non-human intelligences, the angels gathered in joyful assembly. Some humans pop up. Oh, who are those cats? just humans made perfect, right? It's like they're humans that have graduated or ascended, and they're humans. When I looked up the meaning of the word human in the dictionary, it said not animal, divine, or machine. I got out my big fat red pencil and circled that right there. There's the Bible right there saying only humans can ascend. Paul said flesh and blood can't inherit the kingdom of heaven, right? Neither can robots, apparently, okay? Or transhumans, humans blended with machines, right? Only energetic light beings can traverse the layers, right? And so here they are. They're humans made perfect. Perfect is my golden needle that I've been using to weave through these traditions, the perfect ones in Sumeria, the perfecti in Egypt, the Cathars in southern France were called the perfect ones. The Essenes were referred to as the perfecti. In the Apocrypha of John, Jesus identified himself as a member of the race of perfect light humans. So these are just humans made perfect, whole, holy, complete, compassionate. And in the Tibetan rainbow light body tradition, it means they're in their rainbow light body. They've got their cloak of many colors on. And they made themselves that way. They're just humans made perfect, which either means we have been made perfect from the very beginning, which is completely contradicted by Christianity, which says that we are actually beings that are sinners, and therefore we are imperfect. So we're either made totally perfect, or we do something to make ourselves more whole, holy, complete, compassionate, and perfect. How do we make ourselves more whole, holy, complete, compassionate, and perfect? There's lots of ways. We do chanting, we do meditation, we do breath work, we read sacred texts, we visit sacred places, we dance, we sing, we play instruments, we do psychedelics. There are a number of ways that can enhance or augment our body to make it perfect, but we also make it perfect by identifying with our more perfect aspect of ourselves rather than our imperfect aspect of ourselves. And so as I'm talking with George about this, he goes to callers, and a woman calls in and she says, William, I've been listening to you speak about AI and transhumanism for over 10 years now. Very impressive. But let me ask you a question. And she says, my son just served in Afghanistan, and he came home missing 2 limbs. And now he's got prosthetic limbs. William, are you telling me that my son can't ascend because he's transhuman? And it stopped me in my tracks, because yes, that is what I was saying. No, that is not what I meant. And there was a giant cracking sound. And that cracking sound was this pillar I had been building for 10 years, the pure, perfect human pillar, if you will. With that statement, my foundation cracked, because that doesn't make sense that God would prohibit us to ascend if we got a pacemaker, if we have an artificial limb, if we enhanced ourselves with Botox, if we changed our hair color, if we wear cosmetics. Where do you draw the line here? You see what I'm saying? And so I wabi-sabied my pillar. In Japanese art, when like a vase breaks, they'll repair it with pure gold. And they describe the finished product, the repaired product, as imperfect in its, or perfect in its imperfection. It's perfect in its imperfection. It's wabi-sabi, and sometimes they think of the repaired vase as even more beautiful than the original. It's got wabi-sabi. It's got an X factor. It's got something. And I continued to go on building my pillar. A few years later, there's a statement by the Vatican about non-human intelligences, extraterrestrials. They say, yep, if Martians land at the Vatican, we'll baptize them, which is really funny. And then they say, but they might not look like us, ... Who are we to limit God's creativity? Who are we to limit God's creativity? And that just sunk in. That went in. And there was another cracking sound on my pillar, my perfect, pure human pillar. Who am I to say that God didn't send these transhuman technologies, bits, atoms, neurons, and genes, as a way for us to enhance our light body, to enhance ourselves? Who am I to say, God, as a student of the history of technology, I know there are a number of ubiquitous, commonplace technologies that when they were first introduced were viewed with delusion, as even satanic. Eyeglasses, for example, electricity, the microscope, the telescope, wondrous inventions that have transformed our world. You can argue not for the better, but they have allowed us to learn more about our universe. Who am I to stand here and say God did not send these technologies a way for us to ultimately enhance and to perfect our bodies? And so we now come into around 2020, and people start to really wake up around this idea. Something's going on here with AI and transhumanism. You start to get a lot of people talking about it. You get the mystic gene hypothesis piled on top here. The mystic gene hypothesis says, oh, we're wired for mystical experiences, and it's in our DNA. Well, I can go along with that. I think we're wired to manifest the robe or garment of light. Piled on that is the divine message idea. The Old Testament God, the Jewish God Yahweh, wrote a message in our genes, or Ptah, perhaps, the Egyptian god of craftsmen, writes a message in our genes. Therefore, we cannot alter this human body. It's divine. If we lose this body, we lose our humanity, goes this line of thinking. And I'm hearing this going, no, I've been building this pillar with these guys, but suddenly the top popped off. And I found myself going over here to another pillar that it was always ringing in my mind. This idea that for 5,000 years, beginning with the Egyptians, with the Sumerians prior to that, then the Egyptians, then the Old Testament, the Jewish mystics, they all said the same thing. This body is temporary. It's not you. This is your vehicle, and it's temporary, and it's meant to be transformed. And I realized that my perfect, pure human pillar hypothesis, I had been propping that up, and probably for good reason. I mean, it felt right. It felt, like it felt like maybe safe in my opposition, but I realized it's flawed. In fact, if I were building an obelisk in ancient Egypt and I had a pillar like this that was cracked at the base, they would have left it in the ground because it cannot hold the weight. It cannot do its job. And here I was kind of propping it up, and I realized, wait a minute, I'm standing between two pillars at this very moment. I'm like standing in front of the gate of Eden. I'm standing in the gate that Gilgamesh was featured in. In fact, collectively, we are all in that gate right now. We've got one hand up here trying to hold on to what we thought we knew about ourselves and kind of covering up the crack down below. And we got another foot down here that's saying, oh, we were meant to be transforming ourselves. Our body is temporary, and oh, maybe, it's just possible that we can augment the body to accomplish that. And I realized that at that moment, as we're standing in that pillar, we are essentially forming an X out of ourselves. We are really Hercules doing the impossible, trying to hold up two pillars that really shouldn't be held up. And it's that moment that I realized that the key to our dilemma is to recognize not that we are standing before that gate, and maybe even not to realize that we're standing in the gate, in the pillars. Our goal is to find out what's on the other side of the gate. Our goal is to focus on where we go beyond what is presently unfolding with AI and transhumanism, because it will be temporary. There will be something else that comes along after that. And what we've got to recognize, that who we are as beings is not tied to who or what this body is. What we are tied to is our soul. This was the problem with my pure, perfect human hypothesis. There was no soul in that at all. There was no soul. It's called scientific materialism. It's based on the belief that our soul, if we have one, is an expression of our body and our genes, and that's why we've got to preserve the body as pure humans. I don't believe that, because it does not allow for the soul. And this is what I'm trying to get to here, is that the key for all of us is not to hold up these pillars like Hercules, but to step through them as souls. Let's get back to the basis of who we are as spiritual beings, and then start to think about how we will accept or refuse to allow ourselves to augment a body that these spiritual traditions tell us isn't even our true self. Now, that doesn't mean we trash our body. It doesn't mean we pack it full of technology. It doesn't mean any of that. It just means that we do not use an argument based on scientific materialism that tells us we cannot do that, right? Because the spiritual traditions are telling us that our body is meant to be transformed, and maybe these technologies that we're talking about are actually gifts from God to assist us to do this. So I'll let you think about that for a while. We'll come back soon with another presentation about stepping through the gateway and what life will be like once we have attained our wholeness, our holiness, our perfection. So thank you very much for watching. I'll look forward to seeing you next time.